Hello there, Leo listeners. Cara here from Leo Listening, where I help advanced English learners fall back in love with their favourite films and series by helping them break free from the subtitles. So, summer's here if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, and hopefully if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you live somewhere sunny, so you don't feel deprived because it's wintertime where you are. And I wanted to talk about a listening tool that is perfect for these long summer days that are coming up or that are already here. So obviously when it's warm outside, sunny, you don't want to be working, you want to be out enjoying the sun, sitting by a pool somewhere, and certainly not worrying about English or stuck inside with a grammar book doing work. Of course not. And you don't need to be. If you use the right tools, you can get out in the sun, lie by the pool, do what it is you want to do and keep in touch with your English and your listening. So the tool that I feel is the ideal one for this summery period are audiobooks. So audiobooks I've already talked a bit about on the blog before, and I've kind of experimented more with them recently, which I'm going to tell you about. So what's brilliant about audiobooks is you've got hours of listening time. So, you could go out on a 3-hour hike or bike ride or something, and you still wouldn't have finished your audiobook. Also, the audio is a bit slower than what you hear in conversations or films or TV shows, which is nice because sometimes you just need a break, from listening to fast, spontaneous speech that's difficult to understand. And you have permission to listen to something slower when you need to. There are both free and paid options for audiobooks, which is great. So no matter your budget, you can find something. What I love, so as you know, or maybe you don't, I live in France. So that makes it a little bit trickier to find certain books in English compared to when I was living in the UK, and that's probably your situation as well. If you're not living in an English-speaking country, sometimes it's difficult or expensive to find books, especially paper books in English. So audiobooks can be a good solution to that problem of finding paper books in your country in English. And what I love in this digital age and in the age of decluttering, I have gotten rid of so much stuff from my house, and I hate accumulating things, objects. I want to be free of clutter. And so obviously, because audiobooks are digital, they don't take up any space. Well, they take up space in your phone or on your computer, but they don't take up physical space, which is fantastic. So if you remember, or even if you don't, a few months ago, I did an interview with the wonderful Kevin from Feel Good English, and we talked a lot about books and audiobooks, because obviously he teaches people English through sort of personal development resources, and generally that's books. So we had a little chat about audiobooks and about Audible, which is an Amazon company which has a system where you pay a subscription and you get an audiobook every month. And for some reason, I thought that Audible was, more expensive. I thought it was €30 a month, and actually it's $9.95. So after talking to Kevin and after realizing the actual price, I decided to experiment with it and listen to some audiobooks, especially because I'm interested in non-fiction and current or recent books. So it's very easy to get them on Audible. So it's been a brilliant solution to me because things like business books or personal development books, I can sometimes find the translation in French and buy a paper book, but it's expensive, and often they don't have the books that I want. For example, in the local library, they have a really terrible selection of, in English, they only really have fiction novels, which is great. And then in sort of the non-fiction that I'm interested in, so to do with personal development, business, things like this, they don't really have many books even translated into French. So I really like audiobooks as a solution for people like me living in a non-English speaking country who want to get hold of books in English. So that's made that a lot easier for me. So with Audible, I find that for me the subscription is affordable because I wanted to give myself a €10 a month book budget. So essentially that's what I've done with the subscription, which is $9.95. Audiobooks, if you are interested in paying for audiobooks, you'll find that usually they're more expensive than the paperback version of the book or the Kindle version of the book, because there's a lot of costs associated with producing an audiobook because you have to go into the studio, record, get it edited. So for me, having a subscription is a good deal because when you look at the price of individual books, they can be quite expensive. And I've even had some free audiobooks thanks to the Audible subscription because they do special offers and things like this. I've mentioned the storage. I'm just going to mention it again because it's so brilliant. You just need to have space in your phone. Obviously, you can listen anywhere once you've got the app on your smartphone. Well, I suppose the main places that I listen are when I'm cooking because it's a real hassle. I've tried it before. I've tried standing in the kitchen with like a paper book and kind of stirring the food at the same time. It doesn't really work. It's a bit too difficult. Commuting is another great way to listen to audiobooks. And you have some really cool features if you're using the Audible app. You can do some cool stuff. So for example, usually when I'm reading nonfiction, I have, a highlighter pen and bookmarks and stuff. And I love to underline things as well. And you can kind of do the equivalent of that in Audible. There's a little feature called snippets. So if you hear something interesting, you can make a cut, create a snippet that you can come back to later to listen to that insight again. You can also bookmark. So if you stop at a certain point or you want to come back to a section, you can do that. You can jump between the different chapters. So if you don't want to listen to the whole book, you can jump ahead. Not so relevant if you're listening to fiction, but for non-fiction that could be interested. And what's really cool is if you are the sort of person who likes to go to sleep listening to the radio or listening to something, there's a setting in the app for Audible that lets you basically choose to stop the book after a certain time. So instead of like listening to the book all night and waking up in the morning with the book still playing in your ears, you can set it to switch off after a certain period of time. So you can get into bed, put on the sleep mode and set it to switch off after half an hour or 45 minutes or something. And then that way it's not playing in your ears all night. So here's some practical stuff you can do for the listening side with audiobooks. So you can obviously download them onto your phone or whatever device is convenient for you. Now, I mentioned the convenience of not having paper and not having things to store, but it's true that from a listening point of view, as I have said everywhere, and I continue to say, and I will always say, having a text, having a transcript of what you're listening to is so crucial in listening. It is going to make your life so much easier. You're going to learn so much more, achieve so much more. So if you do have a paper copy of the book you're listening to, you can obviously listen along and read at the same time, but also you can do dictations, which are really powerful for the reasons I have explained all over my blog and all over YouTube. And when I say paper, well, I'm saying paper in quote marks, because I mean you could read with a Kindle version of the book. You could borrow the paper book from the library or borrow it from somebody you know. You don't have to actually buy the paper version just to do dictations or read along. A cool feature in the Audible app that I still haven't tried is if you have the book on your Audible app and on your Kindle, there is a setting or an option called Whisper Sync for voice, and it allows you to switch between the Audible audiobook version and the Kindle version. So I think it saves your place in the book, so you can go from listening to reading on a Kindle, which sounds really handy and really cool if you need to switch between the two different ways of consuming the book. What's good as well when you're in an app like Audible is you can jump back and forward. So often when I'm listening to an audiobook, I try not to do it all the time, but sometimes, I get distracted or I don't hear for whatever reason, and you can jump back and forward really easily. So that's great. If you're listening in another language, then you can easily go back if you need to hear something again. You can also challenge yourself, either challenge or make your life easier by increasing or even decreasing the playback speed. So you have an option in the app to do that. What else can you do to get the most out of audiobooks? You could listen to something that you already have either read or listened to in your own language to make your life a bit easier. And you can clip a section, so using snippets if you're in the Audible app, and come back to it and try transcribing it, or ask for help with it if you didn't understand it. And another thing I really like about audiobooks, so because we're all, cinema and TV show fans here, I love reading. I love reading fiction. When I read a book, I can see everything that's happening in my mind. But it's true that audiobooks kind of, for fiction books anyway, they kind of bridge the gap between cinema and reading, because you have that immersive experience of the book, because somebody is reading it aloud to you. So for me, it's almost like something in between reading and watching TV or watching a film, which I think is kind of cool. So I've talked a lot about paid audiobook options in the form of the Audible app. You can also find free options. So last year I wrote a post where I talked a lot about free options, usually on the free download sites for audiobooks. The books tend to be classic literature, and sometimes the books are not recorded by professionals. So the quality might vary a bit, but have a look around, see what you can find. And certainly if you are big on classic, 19th century books, then hey, why not? You can get them for free, so go for it. Some libraries let you borrow audiobooks. Now, I haven't investigated this for my library because, like I said, they usually don't have the books I want, and I certainly won't be able to get them in English. I keep seeing this among friends or colleagues who are in America. So if you're in the US, you might want to investigate what options you have at the library for downloading audiobooks. And see, I don't exactly know how that works, but certainly if you have an app, you get all the other cool options that I mentioned, like clipping and bookmarking, skipping back and forth, changing the speed, and all that. So I'm going to include a couple of, or multiple links to everything I've talked about, so you can take a look. And I'd love to hear from you and know, have you tried listening to audiobooks? What techniques did you find useful? What were you able to do with them? And let me know. So how are you going to spend your summer days? What books are you going to listen to in audiobook format? I love hearing about what you're listening to, so please let me know. And otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.